Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, let's go over all your best placement options when it comes to custom installed radar detectors. Now, the past couple videos that I've posted have all been about placement options for different windshield mount radar detectors, but what if you don't want a radar detector on your windshield at all? What if you want something maybe custom installed like this, built more directly into your vehicle? Well, that's where custom installed radar detectors come into play, and there's a couple reasons why you may want to do this. Number one, maybe you don't want a box on the windshield visible like this at all. You know, it may not look as good with some sort of aftermarket radar detector. Maybe you don't want something visible to others, such as thieves who may actually want to break into your car. Maybe you want something that actually blends much more nicely in with your vehicle and looks much more stock in OEM. Well, that's where custom installed radar detectors come into play. The radar detector itself is going to be a box that's installed somewhere in your engine bay in the grille area of your vehicle, and we'll talk about that more here in just a second. And then you're going to be getting a controller and a display that's mounted somewhere here in your cabin. Like if you look here in my car, you can see the displays for the Escort Maxi i360, the Redenso RCM, the Stinger VIP, the NetRadar DSP LEDs are actually back over there. I've got some additional controllers in here for my ALP, the laser jammers, the Maxi i360 controller is here, plus my installers at Music Car Northwest, amazing installers. They also built in some special remote buttons right here, so in case I've got this custom panel covered up for my radar detector and laser jammer, I've still got my remote kill switch here for the ALP and my remote mute and lockout button for the Escort Maxi i360 in case I've got them covered up here. That's pretty cool. And there's a ton of other cool stuff I've seen with kind of integrating and hiding the different controllers and displays and blending them beautifully in your car. I've seen installs where you can build them into your rearview mirror. Like there's a bunch of really amazing and creative stuff that a lot of these talented installers are capable of. And in the end, it's going to look way better than having a box like this on the windshield. It's going to be a lot more expensive. The radar detectors themselves are more expensive. Plus, you've got all the additional labor costs as well. But if you want something super clean and not a box like this on the windshield, custom installed is definitely going to be the way to go. Additionally, for functional reasons, you may have to do something custom installed. For certain vehicles, the windshields themselves may actually block the different radar signals coming in, and your radar detector may be altogether useless if you install it here behind the windshield. You'll typically see this in certain higher-end luxury cars if you have maybe acoustic packages to where the windshield are designed to kind of block out road noise and all the windshields kind of give you a quieter feel in the cabin. You'll see this in certain luxury cars. That may actually be blocking radar signals from passing through your windshield and preventing your radar detector from being able to alert properly. Same thing if you have a heated windshield. You'll see it sometimes with the wavy lines in the windshield. That can actually block radar signals too, so you can't do a windshield mount. For certain cars like this, if you have something on the windshield that's going to be blocking the signal, you actually may see some sort of little cutout on the windshield, somewhere on the windshield, and those are typically designed specifically for something that you want to install in the windshield, whether it's a GPS receiver or a phone or an RFID toll pass or a radar detector. You're going to need some sort of cutout on the windshield that doesn't block any sort of radio signals, and radar detectors are just one of the many devices that you may want to install in the windshield. So if you don't have a cutout like that on your windshield, or maybe that cutout is already being used by like a toll pass or something, in that case you may need to do something custom installed because a windshield mount may not work at all. And so for that said, let's go over all the different placement options as far as the custom installed radar detectors. Now, I've talked a little bit already as far as your placement options for the controllers and the displays, and honestly for that, I would recommend that you just go to a professional. They can kind of go through your car and find you the very best placement options altogether. I mean, I had my ideas of where I wanted to do it, and the installers that I went to at Music Car, they built some beautiful custom installed stuff that's way better than anything I would have thought of myself, to be honest. And again, there's a ton of really cool different creative options that you can get, and a lot of this is really going to depend on your car, and so I would really recommend going to a professional and they can help you build in something beautiful and clean in your vehicle. I know some common spots, for example in 911s, is you can have the controllers actually mounted kind of in the center console area. Some people prefer having the displays and the controller mounted here so that you can see them more easily while you're driving. So again, it really kind of comes down to what's the easiest things for you to reach while you're driving, and kind of aesthetically and kind of your preferences as far as what you would like, what's available here in your vehicle. Also, a quick tip, if you want more ideas, try searching on Instagram. I find lots of installers post their builds and completed installs there for lots of different vehicles, so that's a great place to go for ideas. Not every install is installed optimally, but again, you can get lots of ideas for especially maybe interior placement in your vehicle. Now, when it comes to the radar detector antennas themselves, these same principles as far as placement are going to be true whether you're installing an Escort, a Redenso, a NetRadar, a Stinger, a Whistler, a K40. It doesn't matter about the brand. physics is physics. And so the principles we're going to talk about here, as far as proper antenna placement, is going to be true for every single brand. So let's go ahead and start talking about that. So when it comes to the radar detector antenna placement, your ideal mounting location in terms of performance is going to be somewhere in the engine bay, maybe in an air intake area, to where you have nothing at all physically blocking the radar detector antenna. If you take a look at the front of my car, for example, you'll see the different radar detector antennas that I have mounted for the Escort, the Net Radar, and the Redenso. And mounting them in the open like this is going to ensure that you get the highest level of performance because, again, nothing is actually blocking the antennas from receiving the radar signal. Now, I know not everybody wants to have your radar detectors visible, or maybe in your car you may not even have a good option. I mean, newer Teslas, for example, don't even have the same air intake since they're electric. I see a lot of 911s, for example, to where you have the antennas actually mounted physically behind the bumper, and so visually it's completely hidden, and that can definitely work in certain instances, and we'll definitely talk about that. And if you take a look at the rear antenna mounting options, there is no air intake back there, so you're almost always installing the antenna behind the bumper. So let's go ahead and talk about your alternate mounting locations if for whatever reason you're not going to be installing the antenna just out in the open like this. Now, the most common mistake that I see is actually installing the radar detector antennas behind some sort of mesh grill, and you may think that this is kind of the next best thing to mounting them in the open, but it turns out this is actually a really, really bad idea. This can really hamper your radar detector detection range more than you would think. Now, the reason this is the case is the same reason why noise canceling headphones work. How do those work? Well, basically what noise canceling headphones are doing is they're listening for different signals coming in from the road or other people talking or whatever, and they're kind of broadcasting the same signals into your ears, but it's shifting the signal. It's a phase shift by 180 degrees to where the two signals actually start to cancel each other out. You have the original signal and you have the signal being produced by the noise canceling headphones. Those two signals interfere in a destructive way to where they're canceling each other out, and then you don't hear anything. It turns out the same thing can happen if you install a radar detector antenna behind a mesh grill. What's happening is some of the signal is actually passing directly into the radar detector antenna unobstructed, while other parts of the signal are kind of passing through the plastic for the mesh grill, which starts to slow down the signal. It creates a similar sort of phase shift, and then you start having some destructive interference between the unobstructed part of the signal and the phase shifted part of the signal. Those will start to kind of cancel each other out. It's not going to be as dramatic as what you'll see in noise canceling headphones, but long story short, in different testing that I've seen, installing different radar detectors behind grills like this can actually reduce detection range by as much as 50%. So for that reason, I would recommend not installing radar detector antennas behind mesh grills. Maybe the one exception I could see is if you take a look at the horns of some antennas, the plastic condenser lenses, you can maybe install one of those where they're out in the open and maybe having like the grill itself sort of splitting the difference between the two horns. Like that could potentially be an option. I haven't actually seen testing of this specifically, but in theory that could work. So that could be an option if you could make it fit, but that's kind of like more of an exception to the rule. Generally what you're going to wind up finding is if you can't mount the radar detector out in the open, or just for aesthetic reasons you may not want to, your next best option is to actually going to be mounting it behind a plastic body panel. You're going to mount the radar detector antenna itself somewhere inside your vehicle, often to like a metal mounting plate in your bumper, for example, and then you're just going to have a flat piece of plastic in front of the antenna, and that sort of continuous flat piece of plastic is going to have very minimal effect to the radar detector's performance. If you take a look, for example, my Stinger VIP antenna that I have, I actually have it mounted behind a removable fog light panel on my car. I've done some testing with and without that fog light panel, and I found that performance is effectively the same regardless of if that panel is in place or not. I've seen other testing as well with and without flat pieces of plastic, and we found the same thing to be true, to where the radar signal is effectively the same whether you have the plastic in place or not. So that can be a really nice option if you don't want the radar detector antenna visible whatsoever. Now, there are a couple things that could potentially mess this up. Number one, anything metal. So don't install your radar detector behind any sort of pieces of metal, because that will really attenuate the radar signal and reduce your overall detection range. Same thing if you have any sort of metallic paint, that can definitely reduce the detection range of your detector as well for similar reasons. And also any sort of weird angles, especially on some exotic cars, those angles can cause some weird things happening to the radar signal, so you want to avoid any sort of weird angles to mount your radar detector behind. Ideally, you're going to want a flat piece of plastic, no angles angles, no curves, no metallic paint, no metal, nothing. Just flat plastic, and in that situation, yes, you should be okay. And again, this is often going to be especially true for the rear antennas, to where you may not have any area at all to mount them out in the open. For my antennas, all my rear ones, I have them mounted in this way to where they're behind the body panel, the bumper panel, and again, the antennas are mounted directly onto the metal bars inside the bumper area. Now, when it comes to doing the installation itself, you can do it yourself. I did it back in my Miata. It wasn't pretty. It was literally just double stick tape and kind of slap it into place. It worked. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. For most people, honestly, I think at this point your best bet is gonna actually go to a professional. There's a lot of them all over the country that are really good at doing this kind of stuff. The main thing that I would recommend is just kind of know some of these basics when it comes to placement and mounting and stuff, so that when you're talking to your installer, you can make sure that you're both on the same page as far as things that are going to both work well and look good. That's really the balance you want to go for. You don't want something to look beautiful but then just completely ruin your radar detector's performance, especially after spending thousands and thousands of dollars on both the equipment and the labor in the installation. You really want your stuff, when you're going for higher end equipment, expensive equipment, you really want it to work well. So definitely keep this kind of stuff in mind. So number one, ideally out in the open, performance wise. Number two, if that doesn't work, install it behind some sort of flat piece of plastic. No weird angles, no bends, no metal, no metallic paint. Avoid all that kind of stuff. Just stick to flat plastic and you should be all right. And so, yeah, that's it for now. If you need any help, if you need any sort of recommendations as far as finding an installer, I know a lot of companies like Escort and Anti-Laser and Redenso, for example, they'll actually have installers that you can check out on their website that they recommend that can help you with actually doing this sort of installation. And so I'll link to a couple of those down in the video description for you as well. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. And until next time, drive safe, and I'll see you in the next video.